happening now? We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, live coming to you from Missoula, Montana, and I was about to say Oklahoma City, but it's not. It's Matthews, North Carolina, actually. My name is Wes Fryer, and I am the middle school innovations teacher teaching media literacy, introductions to engineering, and robotics this semester at Providence Day School in Charlotte. Joining me as always is the EdTech guru of the North, whose stack of analog books continues to climb week after week. Pretty soon we're not going to be able to see the Montana flag, Jason.
Yeah, I know, no kidding. I guess that's just the situation when you buy books and you don't have 24 hours a day to read. So, how are you tonight, Dr. Fryer?
I am good, and I am not in a place where the snow is falling, but given what I've seen with weather, I'm thinking it might be a little cold where you are.
Yeah, it is a little cold where I am. We had pretty cold temperatures on Sunday and Monday of this week. I think it got down to 14 below in Missoula. That was Monday morning. And it was a little chilly getting to work, but we got to figure it out. But we're back up to, we've had a very strange winter this year. It started very early, and it really hasn't let up. But we'll spend the next 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks in temperatures that are closer to 30, 35 during the day and 20 at night.
Did you say 14 below Monday?
Yeah, 14 below. Yeah, and that's not a chill number. That's the straight number.
It was 65 degrees here on Monday.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is now dropped into the 40s. But we're fortunate, a lot of the Midwest relatives, and especially around Austin and Texas, and then even our daughter Sarah back in Oklahoma City, battling ice storms and freezing rain and snow. Lots of fun winter weather. So yay, we've got Peggy in the chat room. We have Betsy joining us again. And yes, thank you also, Peggy, for resharing our show. I just got it out 30 minutes early. I am going to try to do that a little bit earlier. I think it might have helped us get Betsy here. Although you were in a webinar, you said, with Betsy earlier a couple weeks ago when she joined. So yes, the storm is headed east. So we're supposed to maybe get an inch of rain tomorrow, but our temperatures are going to all stay over the freezing mark, and the temperatures will drop a little bit this weekend, but the moisture will be gone. So, hey, now that we've talked weather, Dr. Neiffer, what the heck are we going to do here tonight besides model my Oklahoma Blood Institute Follow Your Instinct, Save Lives shirt?
The EdTech Situation Room is a once-a-week podcast that talks about blood and weather, but also we take a look at all the week's tech news and kind of shoot it through an educational prism in hopes to maybe find something of interest to, really anyone listening, but people particularly involved in education. You can find all the links that we cover, whether we get to them during the show or not, at edtechsr.com. And tonight, we have quite a few links to go through. I imagine that at some point we will jump into the delights that is the AI rabbit hole, but other topics for tonight include the tech correction, Apple, Google, Microsoft, of course, artificial intelligence, the tech correction, free speech and censorship, and media literacy and culture wars. And so is there a particular place, Dr. Fryer, you insert a lot of links tonight, any particular place you'd like to start tonight?
Oh, why don't we just, I didn't know if this was labeled correctly, but the free speech, expression, censorship. Let's do two that are a little bit different here, just because I know we're going to get into our tech correction and our AI routines that we have. I had not heard of this before. This is a German website called Deutschwell. This comes from January 25th, and the headline is Indian police detain students over BBC's Modi documentary. So the BBC, and I have not seen this documentary, has a film about Prime Minister Modi. And basically the government has banned it in the nation of India. And so some students were able to get access to it through YouTube, maybe through a proxy. And the government has labeled the film propaganda. And basically these students got detained after a scuffle with police. So if you can imagine, watching a YouTube video with some of your classmates or colleagues from college, and, then you get arrested by the police, that's what is happening in India today. Both Twitter and Facebook, so both Twitter and YouTube have complied with the Indian government's demands to make sure that these links are not available within India. And so they are asserting that this is colonialist British propaganda. But I guess basically what it does is look back at Modi's political career. Back in the early 2000s, there were anti-Muslim riots in the province, I don't know if I'll say this right, Gujarat, where he was the chief minister. And basically, I guess he was accused of not stepping in. So that's an odd one. We don't usually do something about India. Any thoughts there, Dr. Neiffer?
Yeah, just that, I mean, I don't know. I feel like censorship is getting to be a bit of a sticky word in the United States, and just a reminder that we have very solid free speech laws in the United States that really exceed even most Western democracies. But I do think that what I would say is that it is concerning that the world's largest democracy is engaging in these types of behaviors. But I mean, it makes the internet that much more interesting and that much more I think vital, right? That it looks like there has been some attempt to work around the ban, and I would imagine that if enough copies gets out, then it really wouldn't matter, because you can't, especially a country as large as India. I would imagine that they don't have a lot of controls like Russia does, for example, to go out to the larger internet. That they would have a difficult time keeping something off of the internet if enough copies were distributed. But yeah, certainly interesting article, and I think an important issue of the times.
And there's one other article under that category, and this was from Ars Technica on January 30th. Decades-old law forms biggest obstacle to nationwide TikTok ban, lawmaker says. And it references something I'd never heard of before called the Berman Amendments. We've been talking about TikTok now for a while. Mentioned that in Oklahoma, where our daughter's attending college at the University of Central Oklahoma, all of the state universities were ordered by the governor to block TikTok and not allow any student access. Of course, they can just do that on their own cell phones. That's posed some challenges to university organizations that had a TikTok channel, can't use that anymore legally in the state. And there have been a number of other states that have enacted similar kinds of, I think, usually gubernatorial mandated bans. Well, there is this idea that maybe we're going to have a nationwide ban. And it turns out there were Berman amendments passed back in 1977. They were trying to limit the ability of folks in the United States to trade with hostile nations. Quote, the plan was to prevent average citizens from assisting U.S. enemies, but the law troubled publishers doing business with book authors and movie makers based on hostile nations. And so the congressman at the time, Howard Berman from California, proposed an amendment in 1988, which exempted information and informational materials from the IEEPA. And then in 1994, there was another amendment which specifically exempted electronic media. So this would apparently limit the president's ability to have an executive order banning TikTok. Of course, the article points out, it doesn't say why Congress can't just pass a different law, because these were laws that were passed by Congress. But I don't know, as I see these articles and sort of sniff the political winds, it really does seem like the move is to try and block TikTok. And this article says that the CEO of TikTok, which is ByteDance, is going to testify before Congress for the first time in March. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. The testimony that we have had previously by representatives of the major technology companies, including CEOs, I think really served to more highlight the ignorance of some of our aging politicians than it did to highlight anything new for folks watching the tech industry. But it just does seem that, everybody wants to sort of jump on a TikTok is bad bandwagon. And as I think I might have mentioned last week or the week before, I think it really comes down, this is just my own analysis, to the new Cold War that we have with China, and this idea that, artificial intelligence, as we'll talk about with ChatGPT, is just really accelerating. And so anything that the United States can do that would hamper China, I think that's number one. And then number two is the fear over a Chinese company, probably beholden, most I think people would probably say, to the Chinese government, being able to shape the information feeds of a ton of people in the United States. So have you, Hal, had a TikTok ban in Montana, Jason?
Yeah, so we have there's a ban of TikTok on state-owned devices, and then after some negotiation, it also extended to access on state-owned networks, which happens to include the university that I work at. And that doesn't ruin anything for me in particular, because it's not like I was spending time during the day. Oh, and also time and effort during work hours. So in other words, like even if you don't even if you utilize it separately, you're not supposed to be in TikTok during work time. And like we talked about in the past, one of the things that I think is challenging about that is that I don't know if I get better what the threat is, and I do think it is a bit concerning that there isn't really clear data policies on the behalf of ByteDance, and also, and I think you mentioned this a couple weeks back, Wes, that ByteDance is an AI company, that that's what they say they most are engaged in, and so I would assume then that any data we feed to TikTok, and remember, you don't have to be a creator or post something to create data for TikTok. In fact, if you are swiping on things, if you're sending likes out, if you're leaving messages, if you're creating a larger network of what you watch and what you follow, certainly it doesn't take much to think of sinister ways to use that data. But there might be a bigger point here, which is that it's learning some component of human behavior that you don't know what's happening with that data. I think that's true of really all the platforms, right? But I think that's something also to kind of keep in mind or to be thoughtful about.
If I am counting correctly, we have 33 articles in the show notes tonight, so we will probably not get through all those. What would you like to talk about next?
Well, sure. Let's do some like tech stuff. First, I want to highlight this article that I had missed last week, but I think it's really important. This is from Windows Central on January 20th. There have been a lot of tech layoffs in the last several weeks, impacting Google's parent company, Alphabet. Microsoft has laid off several people. I've seen some references to that that Apple's not going to have to lay off as much because they were much more circumspect about hiring during the pandemic, so they won't have to fire as many people as companies scale down as demand has lessened post-pandemic. But apparently, as part of the layoffs, massive Microsoft layoffs, as Windows Central calls it, the virtual mixed reality and HoloLens teams were basically depreciated, and that's actually quite surprising to me, because I thought that HoloLens was going to continue to grow. And in fact, we've had articles, I think, on this podcast that argue things like the Microsoft was really the only one that seemed to be headed in the right direction when it comes to mixed and virtual reality. I did do a HoloLens demo at ISTE, and I'm trying to remember which ISTE it was. I think it was the last San Antonio ISTE, if I remember correctly. But I spent a whole afternoon in a Microsoft lab looking at demos of things, and they had us with HoloLenses looking at museum pieces and looking at artifacts in an interesting and three-dimensional way. That was mostly a mixed reality piece, but I really did think that Microsoft was going to end up having something viable in this space. And I will say that I still think that Apple's going to end up being a major player here with augmented reality. But the bottom line is that if Microsoft doesn't come up with this technology, or if it's not them, I think it's going to have a harder time getting into schools. One of the greatest things about something developed by Microsoft is that they have such a footprint. The same is true as Google, that the barrier to entry for schools is much lower as opposed to a third party.
We interrupt this response to bring you a Microsoft-sponsored ChatGPT answer to the question I just posed. How much has the U.S. government and military invested in Microsoft HoloLens and VR technology to date? And this is what ChatGPT says. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact amount of investment by the U.S. government and military in Microsoft HoloLens and VR technology. However, Microsoft HoloLens has received some significant contracts from the U.S. military for its AR technology, such as a $480 million contract with the U.S. Army for the Integrated Visual Augmentation System, IVAS program. U.S. military has shown interest in VR technology for various training and simulation purposes. However, the exact amount of investment by the government in these technologies is not publicly disclosed. Now, I did mention a couple of weeks ago when I got back from a trip to Kansas, and I had visited with a family friend who is working for the U.S. Army. He had mentioned the discontinuation of a significant fully VR program for soldiers where they're going to wear full headsets and all these cameras. And I think we had an article a couple of weeks ago saying that a senator had passed something to say we're done with that. So this is a really big deal. And one of the fun things that we, try to do here on the EdTech Situation Room is, gaze into our virtual Palantir, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, and, try to predict the future. And it really does look like AR, VR, while there are, and we've got some other articles in the show notes, there are foundational technologies that Apple and Google specifically are investing in, which portend not an end to the technologies, but not the imminent explosion that the well-known CEO of Meta, formerly Facebook, would have us think is going to happen, really, really soon. I have an article that is related to this one that I put under Apple, and this is a CNET article from January 31st, and it is headlined, "The smartphone shipments are imploding. Is Apple's iPhone next?" And we've actually do have an article, which I don't necessarily know we'll mention, but the earnings did come out, and it was down with iPhone sales. But here's what I thought was shocking from this article, because you're right, Jason. We've talked about layoffs in the tech world, but just listen to these statistics if I can find this. This is quote, "Analysts so far don't seem concerned that Apple may be in a similar position as Amazon, which eliminated 18,000 jobs, Microsoft, which laid off 10,000, or Meta and Google, which together laid off an additional 23,000. All told, an estimated, this is basically a quarter mil, 235,596 people lost their jobs across tech in the past year, according to layoffs.fyi, an industry tracker. So 250,000 people in 2022 lost their tech jobs. That is really, really stunning. But we have reported this, and we've heard, Sundar Pichai and some other folks really forecast that, these folks are so much smart. I mean, they're not smarter than Dr. Neiffer. I'm not saying that, but they're definitely way smarter than me. They have a lot more access, to industry studies and all these kinds of things. And so we've heard Pichai, the CEO of Google, or I guess is he Alphabet? We've heard him talk about, anyway, seeing that this was going to happen and that these layoffs were happening. So is this going to portend a larger recession in the economy? I don't know. But those are huge numbers of tech folks that are being laid off. And I don't know if that's going to have any direct impact on schools. But I think an overall slowing of the market, generally means, less consumer options, less vibrancy, less innovation, just a general slowdown. So,
yeah, very interesting. And I also think too, by the way, there's another Apple article there that's somewhat related to that. Their Ars Technica article from January 25th talks about how Apple's beefing up their smartphone services in a quote unquote silent war against Google. The reason why I think this is hilarious is because, when hasn't Apple perceived themselves as being in a war with Google over phones, right? If you go back to the history of Android, Steve Jobs thought that Android ripped off the iPhone, and in fact threatened, the thermonuclear war over the situation of Android
stealing touch, pinch and capacitive touch and all that.
So I thought that's interesting, but I will say, it used to be more or less a phone every 2 years guy, but that was in part due to the fact that I was getting a carrier subsidy. I've been a lot more careful about that. I get more updated phones if and only if I have an opportunity to to buy a cheaper one. Like when I was had a 4 or 5 year stretch with either used or cheap Android phones. That was a big deal in my strategy. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that part of what's driving this larger phone situation is that people just don't feel the need to spend $1,300 every other year on a phone. And in fact, most of the, I don't know how you put this, civilians, normal people, the non-nerds, however you want to put them.
Those not subscribing currently to the EdTech situation.
Right. Yeah. So in other words, not, people not in our audience, that the bottom line is that most people I know are using very old phones and don't upgrade all that often. And the upgrade is kind of a big deal, or they wait for a deal to do it.
So, and it's also to do with the lockdowns in China and the impact that that's had on factory production, not just for Apple, but for other companies. Peggy has a comment as far as what sideloaded apps are. And so I'll just go ahead and do that article. This is Ars Technica from today on February 1st. The headline, Apple should be required to let iPhone users sideload apps, Biden administration says. And I actually do have an EdTech connection to this. So what does sideload mean? It means an alternative app store. In the past, that has meant jailbreaking your iPhone, which Apple, said was illegal and voided your warranty and was horrible. We've seen Europe pass some different legislation that seems to suggest they're going to force an alternative app store. We've had the lawsuit, which is kind of, in my limited understanding, between the Fortnite owner, somebody will have to help me with that company. But anyway, the company selling Fortnite, not wanting to just give Apple 30%, so wanting to have subscriptions and things happen, outside the app. If people can sideload apps, there's the possibility of alternative app stores. And here's the real connection for students as well as for families and everybody. And that's going to be safety as far as installing stuff. If you would jailbreak your device, you were really putting yourself and your device at risk of malware, a greater risk than you had if you were straight up just using the App Store. That's one of the things that Apple, Tim Cook and other Apple representatives continue to harp on with all this is we're protecting the public, we're protecting iOS users. And I think that's a very, legitimate claim. At the same time, obviously, maybe this isn't obvious, but I think that there is some legitimacy to the claim that, Apple has a kind of a stranglehold over developers, and they've got a huge amount of market power because of the way that they've architected their system. Now, to Apple's defense, they designed the system, they invented the modern smartphone, and they, have invested and continue to invest a lot in the platform. But again, looking at the tea leaves of this, looking at what Europe has done, it really does seem that we're probably going to see some alternative app stores happen probably in 2023. And that's going to be important from a safety standpoint. It's not a stretch to think that some of the young students, the preteens and teens in our classrooms might be even more likely than older aging parents to install extra apps and give things a try. And while that might bring new function and cheaper gaming and other benefits, there are some real risks to sideloading apps. So I think it's important to have those conversations with really everyone that involve internet safety, whether it's installing extensions, apps, anything. One of the benefits of the modern mobile app-based, operating system architecture has been, the fact that you don't have, shareware and freeware and the opportunity. I mean, we've seen a maturing of operating systems to where you're having to put your password in a lot more frequently. And sometimes it's irritating, right? In the latest version of iOS, even when you're pasting into an app, it's popping up. Do you allow paste? Do you allow paste? I run into that with Wakelet all the time. And also my recipe, Paprika is my favorite, recipe app on the iPhone. So anyway, I think that there's an internet safety conversation to have. Are you going to be excited to sideload apps, Jason? And is this going to revolutionize your computing experience on your smartphone?
Wes, the thing I keep thinking about here is that for all the folks that are running around talking about how, I'm not a developer, so I don't know what those economics look like. And I do think the 1/3, the 25%, whatever this amount is, seems pretty stiff for what you're getting in return as a developer. But there really isn't such a thing on an iPhone as a virus or malware, right? You can sometimes get something weird from the web, right? That I've seen. I've gone to click on a link before that took me to a website that went full screen and told me you have a virus on your phone. Click here to do da 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 da. So that's delivered by the web, right? So it's kind of a different thing. But maybe when I was younger, I would have done something there, but I don't. There would have to be a pretty persuasive and secure marketplace for apps for me to go in that direction, to try an alternative app store. I have to trust it an awful lot, and I just don't see that being a real real alternative to the app store. And maybe I'm just getting older and less patient with that, right? But the bottom line is there has to be a middle ground between developers get charged too much or Apple's taking too much profit and just swinging the doors open completely. Because if anything, I feel like the computer manufacturers, maybe for economics, but I think also largely for security reasons, are moving towards more of the lockdown mode. And I think that I would probably stick with the App Store on my Apple portable devices.
Great comments and feedback and questions in the chat room. So thank you, Betsy, for the reminder. Yes, the creator of Fortnite is Epic Games. And in fact, in our show notes, if you search for Epic or Epic Games, you'll find a number of those articles, which have seemed to kind of go both ways. Some of them have supported Apple. Some of them have supported Epic. Peggy asked, so if you would have to jailbreak your phone in order to install apps not in the App Store. And yes, that is correct. That's what a jailbreak has been. And not to be too transparent, but in the late 2010s, some kind of notorious guest blogger named Sherman Nicodemus, who had somehow exclusive access at times to my iPhone, actually, for two reasons, I jailbroke that phone, rumor had it, and blogged about it on my blog. It was because of the need to mirror the phone for professional development and workshops. It was way before AirPlay, before Apple TV. There was no way to do that. And my understanding was it wasn't good enough for Apple to want to do that. That had to do with processor and video, RAM and all those kinds of things. And then the other function was tethering, because this was before there was any legal tethering. In fact, I mentioned, I think last week or the week before this, class action lawsuit that AT&T is having to pay up on, and that had to do with the claims of unlimited. But this prohibition, it's almost like a right to repair sort of thing. Well, you can buy this tractor, but you can't repair it. You could have this phone, but you can't install anything from another unauthorized person, and you certainly can't tether your device to use your laptop to get on the cellular network. And now that's very common with I think with most cellular plans. So Betsy poses a good question here. She says, I wonder what the risk is for the ecosystem, talking about the mobile app ecosystems. If others are doing this, does it release risk into the larger system, even for those not doing it? I mean, I certainly would say that it's going to release dynamics where when there are more cases of malware and people are needing to be more careful, perhaps people are going to be less hesitant to try different apps, and it's just going to overall maybe increase some fear on the part of consumers. What do you think about that, Jason? Are there broader risks to the ecosystem of this?
Scam apps is an example of this, right? Like I think that this has happened on Android before, that you could, and these are kids, right? That are largely doing this. That they download an alternative app store. Most of the apps in there are fake, and it steals credentials and creates. I mean, there's all sorts of security pieces.
Some of them do wallpapers and other kinds of things, and there's UI, which for the visual interface. Anyway, that they're going to tweak. But my impression has been rampant with malware and bad actor created software.
And I think that decreases overall trust, and it increases FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I think with all the progress that Google has made in the last couple of years to provide an experience to where you have to choose to unlock your Google phone or your Android phone, and there's some reasons to do that. I'm not saying that there's not, but I I I, I do think tech needs regulation. I'm not sure if this is what I'm particularly looking for, right? If you want to have some conversations about capping, uh, as an example, capping the percentage that the developers can get charged, that seems like an awfully bizarre, very strict way of going about this. But I would be more supportive of that than saying that you have to be able to install on anything. And there's also a point of which too that I wonder if there's some limitation ultimately, right? Like, why can't I install my own apps on my really crappy dashboard experience in my car, which is now basically not functional? I have a 2014 Ford Escape that was actually the first new car I've ever purchased. I did it in my late 30s. But the no, early 40s, as a matter of fact. I'm screwing up my own age, but I did it in my early 40s, and I particularly picked a model because it had a nice on-screen experience, replacing my former car, which literally had a tape player in it. And it's now basically worthless because it was too early for CarPlay or Android Auto, and the nice big screen. None of it functions anymore because they depreciated all of it because there's no APIs left, so it can't go on the internet, do all the cool things it was supposed to be able to do. Why can't I install something on that, right? Like that, I think we're picking fights here that I just don't think are that defendable.
Aftermarket, Jason. We have a 2007 Sequoia still going strong, and I've got an aftermarket. I think it's Pioneer system with AirPlay, and
Yeah.
the nice thing is the iPhone updates and AirPlay is updated. So I would highly recommend that.
Yeah.
Betsy says new apps plus AI coding is yikes, and it is. I think maybe I
Great
mentioned
point.
my experience with JavaScript. I still have it. I don't know. I'm not blogging that often, but I had an incredible experience week before last, spending 3+ hours writing code in JavaScript, which I do not know, but thanks to ChatGPT, I was actually making some code, do some stuff that was working. So
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see. But I kind of think that just like, well, we've certainly had privacy law, and Europe is leading the way. I think, dare I say this? I think Europe's representative democracies are doing a better job at this point addressing the issues of the tech correction specifically, and more broadly some other issues as well. So are we going to see these changes in the United States? I don't know, but we have privacy law in Europe, and we certainly have some moves in European government to force Apple to open up the ecosystem. And if Apple opens it up in Europe, it's hard to imagine them not opening it up in the United States. I suppose that's possible, but a little doubtful.
Okay, well, one other quick article to share. This one seems kind of like boring in comparison to the others. Why don't you talk about that that Google article?
Okay, so 9 to 5 Google reports today that Google says that Lens and Maps Live View are a prelude to its long-term vision for augmented reality. And last week, and then we just talked a little bit about HoloLens being killed by Microsoft. The tea leaves seem to indicate that no dramatic, exciting things coming, like from Apple, probably no glasses, and that we're not going to see just this incredible explosion of virtual reality and augmented reality technologies this year in 2023. But like Apple, laying the foundation for different kinds of 3D, software, I think hardware kits, and I don't know if they're called APIs, but the stuff that developers need to be able to have and access in order to create these very rich AR and VR experiences. Google's doing the same thing with its Lens and its Map View Live. And so there was an event, I guess, with Samsung, and they were talking about how, quote, we're working, this is Lockheimer, who I think is with Samsung, maybe. Quote, we're working towards a new generation of computing enabled by immersive experiences across brand new form factors that will further elevate what you can do with Google. All this is incredibly exciting, from the hardware and core technological capabilities to the apps and services. Cannot see what we build together. And so 9 to 5 is saying that these comments are undoubtedly the most significant and detailed since the end of Google I/O 2022, when Sundar Pichai previewed translation glasses. And, those I/O demos of language translation really were exciting and pretty amazing. So I'm glad that these things are moving forward. Are these coming to a classroom near you? No, but the language translation that's in any browser is better than ever. That's AI driven. But I don't know that we're going to have the next generation Google Glass and Apple's version of that, coming soon. But the technologies continue to march forward. But at this point, I think it's still the promise of a transformative technology. And people are kind of waiting for Apple, I think, to release the next big thing, that revolutionizes it all. We might be surprised this year, but it doesn't seem like those are coming. But the underlying technologies are continuing to mature and develop.
There we go.
Okay.
Well,
I have one that's a little bit different.
Okay.
But I have it under media literacy. So this will be a bit political. Robert Reich, former labor secretary under President Obama, writes a Substack, and this has to do with the price of eggs. I don't know, but if you've noticed how expensive eggs are, Jason, in Montana. This was his post on January 28th. And it's entitled "When Fox Entered the Hen House and Tried to Make Me into a Souffle." Basically, he explains that, apparently the reason why eggs are so expensive is that he calls it corporate greed. But with inflation and things like that, there are some companies that have tremendous power over the nationwide cost and distribution of eggs. There's a letter that he cites in here from a consumer advocacy group called Farm Action. And they're saying that, the real culprit is this 138% hike in the price of a carton of eggs. It's a cohesive scheme among industry leaders. But it talks about how anytime the words corporate greed are spoken, that Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News, really sees that as an absolute, I don't know if you call that a dog whistle. I think that context may be different, but basically they go after whoever dares to say, corporate greed. It's a fascinating article. And I think it's so tough to talk about these things in school and sometimes out of school as well. We do need to talk about bias in media, and we need to try to encourage media literacy. I think that certainly this is an admittedly, progressive leaning article because Robert Reich is a Democrat and a progressive leaning guy who's criticizing Fox News. But it's pretty fascinating because of the widespread nature of how expensive eggs are. And people are wondering, why are eggs so expensive? And the way in which this is being portrayed in the media, I just really found that to be a fascinating article. So are we as classroom teachers going to be able to talk about this tomorrow with our students? I'm not in middle school. And even if I was teaching high school, I think I would tread very carefully when it comes to this because, we have students as well as families that kind of just line up, on different sides of literally the aisle when it comes to, different news agencies and things like that. But I think it's worthwhile to discuss issues like inflation, the economy. Why are eggs so expensive? And certainly this could be one view that would be discussed. So you can just let that one lie if you want.
I will.
Okay. That's fine. Where would you like to go next?
Well, we got about 20 minutes or so. Let's do some AI news because it's it's a whole thing. First, I want to announce a couple of quick pieces of breaking news. The first one is we talked a couple weeks ago about GPT-0, which is a startup that was using AI to detect AI, and they released a new version. I think it was on Monday or Tuesday, but it is next level better than its first version, which gave you some statistics to consider and didn't really explain what the statistics meant and didn't really make an evaluative judgment. Well, now GPT-0 is much better. You put in 250 characters or better. and it does still have its metrics, which I don't fully understand. I've read through them. I can wrap my brain around it just a little tiny bit, but not epically yet. So, but it tells you, yep, I think this was written by a human. Yep, I think this was written by AI, or it's some mix of both. And it actually highlights the phrases that it believes were AI generated. And I did put it through some testing this week. Mostly of my writing versus what I've generated with ChatGPT, and it was pretty darn accurate and did an excellent job of highlighting that. I still don't think this doesn't answer any questions yet, and I do think that we've got a lot of stuff to do here, right? But the bottom line is that this particular tool is pretty solid.
Okay, there's some really funny things about this. Number one, the subtitle for GPT-0 is "Humans Deserve the Truth." Okay, one of the big issues with ChatGPT and generative AI text tools like this is that they are assimilating a vast number of documents, and sometimes they're not accurate. And we cannot have a high level of certainty about the truth of what they're claiming. I don't think ChatGPT-0 can either. I just tried it with a portion of the example that I read earlier in the show about Microsoft HoloLens, and it concludes your text is likely to be written entirely by AI. But like, what is truth? And so I think that's kind of interesting that they're using that. A Few Good Men, Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth. They're also inventing these words, right? So under stats, this is the rating that I get. My average perplexity score is 28.000. A document's perplexity is the measurement of the randomness of the text. And then the burstiness score, which is 9 and 539 thousandths. A document's burstiness is a measurement of the variation in perplexity. And so, man, I think that Neil Postman would have a field day, with these invented words talking about technopoly and, let's bow down to our scientific and technological overlords. Because obviously this is responding to a lot of AI panic that people are having. And hey, maybe this, college coder and the team that he's evidently assembling is going to be able to, really cash in and do great with this. But there's invented words here, claims about words like truth that I don't think are defined at all, and that we really get at all with this tool. And so, anyway, there's a lot to interrogate here. But hey, I'm glad. No, I didn't realize that a new version of this had been written. And for the record, I haven't done this yet, but actually I did. I did ask ChatGPT to write a obituary for my mother. We're going to have a memorial service for her here in February. And I didn't feed it a lot of information prior to getting that, but I'm actually going to do that and probably then modify what it gives me. I don't know. We'll see. But glad to know this is here. There's a lot to take in and possibly interrogate. Sorry to have such a long response to that, but wow.
Well, the other breaking news, because I think it's also related to the evolution of tools. This was just announced a couple hours ago, but OpenAI has announced that ChatGPT will have a Plus edition at $20 a month, which there had been some rumors a couple weeks back that the professional version of this would be $40 a month. I think it's worth either one, to be honest, with the amount that I'm starting to use this, just the rewriting alone. But you'll remember that, all the tools are available now in beta. This is never going to be something that is going to be, 100% free all the time in all circumstances. And in fact, I noticed there was a new version of ChatGPT released on Monday. It was the January 30th update, not version 4, which is still a couple months off, but a new update for 3.5. And for several hours, it was almost impossible to get anything generated and sent back to you because people were using it. And you'll cut in front of the line when you're a Plus user. So, I've paid a lot more per month for a lot less functionality. So I'm going to be a customer of this, but that price is now available. I know, Wes, that you're also mindful of subscriptions. Does that number give you pause? Would you be in the market for a $20 Chat GPT access?
Yep.
Yep.
I think that 20 is certainly a lot better than 40. When I look at subscriptions and things like that, if I'm paying a subscription, I'm probably going to use it a lot more. Now, is that true of my
Yeah.
gym membership right now that I'm about to cancel? No. But yeah, if you think about that and you're aware of it, I think, you're going to use it more when you're paying for it. So today really is kind of an interesting time since they are in open beta. We potentially could have way more students using it than we will once it moves into some kind of a paid status. So it's just interesting. I could see them maybe cutting off the responses maybe for the free version. And then if you wanted to get more robust, or maybe the number of iterations that you get to do are limited, it's going to be fascinating. But this technology is also going to be integrated undoubtedly into the Microsoft Bing search engine. There's another article I don't know if we'll get to, but we talked about some of this last week that, there's folks at Google that are very concerned because no, this is not a search engine. And I've seen some good explanation about that. But a lot of times when you go to Google, you're not necessarily wanting a bunch of search results that you got to filter through. You'd like an answer. And if you have a tool that can give you an answer that works and that is good enough for your purposes, or maybe it's better than what you expected, that's going to be a big deal.
Well, and I want to talk one more quick thing about, and I need to find that this was on the TikTok app. I watched this a couple of days ago, and I saved the video, I think, so I'll be able to find it again. But a doctor, I think an ER doctor, posted on TikTok about using ChatGPT to try to diagnose someone that had presented themselves with certain symptoms in the ER. And I won't go into too many details about it, but what he was really impressed with was that it presented this differential diagnosis that wouldn't have been the mainstream diagnosis, but was correct for an awful lot of people. And the secondary or alternative diagnosis gets missed quite a bit. And so he was really impressed by that. He said, I wasn't expecting it to be so accurate or provide such an interesting alternative answer. But he then said that he asked for a citation, and it presented a citation to him from like the European Journal of Internal Medicine, and had author names, and it was the 2017 edition 2 or whatever that looked like. And he's like, wow, that's really impressive. So he went and looked it up, and it was completely made up. It wasn't the authors were made up. The title was made up. It was in the format of a citation.
They'll call that a hallucination of the generative AI.
And
wow.
And the point he was making was that, listen, it's it was so certain. It wasn't telling you, check this, or I don't know if I got this right or not, which I know ChatGPT actually does that quite a bit. Is it lets you know that, for example, with health information, you should go see a doctor if you think you have any of these things. But that's where I will never be the person that says that we should ignore this or ban it, or we have to figure out a way to embrace this in our broader structure of education. But wow, that really diminishes the amount of trust I would have for something. And I did report on this several weeks ago when we started talking about this issue. I did type some paragraphs in for my dissertation and had it generate additional paragraphs based on that. This is from lex.page, and the generated paragraphs were pretty good, but they had citations that were fake in it. They looked like real citations, but they weren't.
So this will be something to investigate and talk about with colleagues and with students as well. Incidentally, I was invited today to be on a podcast panel for our school's official podcast talking about ChatGPT and generative AI technologies. So that's going to be kind of cool. Wow. The fact that, okay, this is based a lot on language models, right? And so language translation, but see, now we're going for truth. Now we're going for medical diagnoses. Now, it's like we're all jumping in to say, okay, is this the singularity? Do we have artificial general intelligence yet? and we don't. And those kinds of examples, anyway, I mean, there's a playfulness with this as well, right? Where probably everybody who is taking some time to use the tool is exploring and trying to probe boundaries. But I think it is really important that we highlight the limitations and yeah, to what degree is somebody gonna make a really life-changing decision, based on this advice, which may include hallucinated, invented sources.
Yeah. And there's no way to know. I will tell you one other quick thing about my own experimentations with this. Well, I've had a lot of them in the last week or so, but I started asking ChatGPT about me. Like I started asking, what they used to call it, ego searching on Google, or something along those
Your
lines.
digital footprint search.
Yeah, well, there was a term for this a long time ago, and I'm surprised I forgot it because I used to talk about it a lot when I gave trainings to teachers. But I ego chatted with ChatGPT, and it was really funny because for the first time ever, it said, "Well, I can search the internet for that. Do you want me to search the internet?" So I said yes, and then it errored out. I don't think it actually was programmed to do that. I think that people started saying things to it like, well, why don't you search the internet for that? Or I would have liked an internet search here, or something along those lines. Kind of treating it like a Siri, or I'm sorry, I use the S word, but all the virtual personal assistants that existed, and it of course didn't bring me any results. It also told me when I tried to ego search later, there were just too many Jason Neiffers and it would need more information. So of course that's not true either. But that language model thing is really important because it's not a search engine, right? And you talk about digital literacy, just having students understand the difference between a search engine and a language model, I think is pretty darn important.
If it's broadly available, though, that won't necessarily stop people from using it in the way they want to use it. By the way, ChatGPT answers the question, Jason, and yes, indeed, it is called an ego search or ego surfing.
There you go. So,
or maybe that's a hallucination on the part of ChatGPT. Who knows?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Were there any tech correction? Well, I'll do this quick one about AI. This is interesting. Defense News, January 31st, AI-powered surveillance sought for U.S. Central Command. One of the things that we're hearing about AI and just algorithms and automation in general, right, is this is going to lead to losses of jobs. I don't know that a ton of the job losses in Silicon Valley right now are due to this. I think it has to do more, like you said, with, inflated hiring during the pandemic and, economic slowing and other kinds of economic factors. But the U.S. government wants to have eyes in the sky to watch all kinds of things. Specifically, U.S. Central Command is the Middle East and Southwest Asia. And so according to this article, the Air Force wants to install these always-on surveillance tools fueled by artificial intelligence and other advanced computing technology at sites overseen by Central Command. One of the things it mentions is Al Udeid Air Base. Now, I bet that there's a lot of folks that have absolutely no clue where this is. It is in Qatar, and I had a chance to be there in Qatar for a middle school conference about, I think, 6 years ago, and my mind was kind of blown. I wasn't on the base, but I was in Qatar and I was very close to it, and I gained a lot more information about how vast, that it is. So basically, rather than having human beings watching all of these locations, they want AI to do that, much in the same way that my Google Nest, watches outside our house and tells me if there's an animal or if there's a person, and if there's a face that's unknown to it, it's able to do that with that technology. So the Air Force has released some quotes or some requests for proposals, I guess. And it says this quote, the RFP says this artificial intelligence system would replace the need for in-person monitoring and reduce up to 75% of those billets, that's human assignments, enabling U.S. Air Force resources and force protection assets to be employed against higher priorities. So again, an example of the augmented world that we are in today and that we're moving into, where it won't be a complete replacement of humanity, but it's going to be an augmentation of capabilities. And I thought that was kind of an eye-opening AI-related article.
Super interesting. I will do one other quick one here related to just kind of its use in the classroom. Stanford Daily reported on January 22nd that scores of Stanford students admitted using ChatGPT on final exams, and their definition of score was smaller than I would have assumed. I think it's like 18% or 22%. I'm sorry, 17% of Stanford students said. I don't know if that is scores. Certainly a large.
I think
number.
a score is 20, isn't it? Like, don't you need to have multiples of 20?
Like that. Yeah,
I don't know about that.
If you're going to do that, but I mean, the fact that 1 in 5, or nearly 1 in 5, use ChatGPT on any fall, quarter, final assignments or exams, I think is pretty telling. And this is not a 6 month from now thing we need to be talking about. It's a right now thing we need to be talking with. And then also an interesting article from NBC News on January 24th that in what they were calling research, a Wharton School professor gave an MBA exam to ChatGPT, and the Penn professor said that ChatGPT was able to pass it at a B- or B on the exam itself. And the bot score, it quoted, shows its remarkable ability to automate some of the skills of highly compensated knowledge workers in general, and specifically knowledge workers in the jobs held by MBA graduates, including analysts, managers, and consultants. And again, if that's not a stunning, stuff is coming here, I think that's a good sign of it.
I predict we're going to see academic studies soon where you're going to have some blind tests where folks are not going to know who the author is, and they're going to be evaluated. And so we'll have some metrics on that. Of course, if they wait for that typical academic publishing cycle, ChatGPT is going to be infinitely better by the time, the article sees the light of day. I thought that Stanford Daily article was fascinating for the graph under ChatGPT honor code opinions. Quote, do you think that using ChatGPT is a violation of the academic honor code? About 30% said yes if used for more than just ideas. About a quarter said yes if used at all. About a fifth said yes if submitted with no edits. And then 13% said no, and 13% were unsure. That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And I think that it's going to be a good question to consider as a teacher, as a professor or instructor. Will it matter if students use ChatGPT? Will you be able to craft assessments for student learning and skill demonstration that are more performative and more authentic in such a way that whether they use ChatGPT or not, they're going to have to demonstrate knowledge and skills and capacity? I don't know, man. I'm thinking about debate too, right? It's going to be interesting. The intersection with technology. Let's just go a little bit beyond. I want to at least mention these two other articles that are pretty. Anyway, I'll try not to comment too long on them. BGR, January 30th. Gmail creator says ChatGPT, quote, might destroy Google within 2 years. Now, like we've said earlier, it's not a search engine, but that doesn't stop people from using it as one. And the fact that the Gmail creator is seeing that it poses this huge threat. Google has, I think we talked about last week, done some pretty major reassignments, within its teams. This is a huge thing, just culturally, and certainly within Silicon Valley, but in terms of education as well. And then the last one I think I'll mention, these are also good. Netflix stirs fears using AI-assisted background art in a short anime film. So this idea that, hey, generative AI will not only be able to create static images, which may sort of preview a Geek of the Week that's coming soon from a friend that but also, full-blown animations. And so Netflix actually they cited the labor shortage, and they kicked a hornet's nest, according to the subtitle, by making an AI-assisted 3-minute short. But again, I think that portends the future. And then this one from The Observer, from January 20th, the AI ethics war will make the content moderation debate look like a picnic. The ethics behind, how chatbots address political issues, addressing intellectual property issues, addressing things like voice emulators, and whether, people should be able to emulate voices without permission, public officials and celebrities. the ethics of this are absolutely fascinating, and we're only beginning to see the pot being stirred. Geeks of the week, sir.
Well, Dr. Fryer, I have one to share that is actually an AI tool. I had been kind of disappointed about a lot of the kind of free generative AI apps that existed, and then I figured out that's because I wasn't utilizing the super popular ones that seem to have the most development going into. So it's called Midjourney at midjourney.com, and there's a free version of it. I did pay for 1 month of a pro account. Because I was tired of waiting around for the apps. It's got a really bizarre interface because you have to do all the interaction with Midjourney through Discord, the chat platform. So there is no way to just go to Midjourney and do something. You have to have a Discord account, and then you're actually talking to the Discord bot, which I have on the background the last couple of days. But if you're wondering, how people were able to do things like create children's books, we talked about that several weeks ago. The guy that created children's book written by AI, and then images generated, and they looked okay. They were good enough to publish. That is Midjourney does that. So midjourney.com. And you, sir?
Okay, I'll overshare, but I'll try to go fast. Top Gun Maverick. I teach Lego robotics, and they completely did the trailer for Top Gun Maverick with Legos. So if you know anyone who likes Legos, that's kind of fun. Archive Today. This is really a new one to me. If you want to create a backup of something like a Twitter moment, but really any website, yes, the Internet Archive can do that, but you can create one using this Archive Today. Now, they've got multiple versions, and this one is called Archive PH. But shout out to my friend Ryan Collins in Ohio, who I actually met via Twitter and then got to meet at their conference a number of years ago. I posted this on Mastodon and got this as a suggestion. So there is the archive of one of my Twitter moments. I was using Twitter moments for quite a while instead of blog posts to basically aggregate a whole bunch of tweets from a conference. And if I'm going to ditch Twitter, I don't want to ditch my Twitter moments. And then finally, my wife and I, Shelly, have launched a new podcast, and it's called Wes and Shelly Share. So we are going to share about healthy life habits, parenting, marriage, navigating the opportunities and challenges of the empty nest. And I see that I need to update that description because outdoor adventures is supposed to be number one. So 30-minute shows we're doing on Sunday, coming to a podcatcher near you. Jason, where can folks find you when you are not being held over the hour on a Wednesday night?
Well, I'm still on Twitter, Tech Savvy Teach. I've been actually enjoying Twitter a little more lately. I don't think it has anything to do with the new ownership. I just think that I've found some news pieces there. I'm also working hard to kind of reestablish a lot of those connections on Mastodon, Neif, at mastodon.cloud.
And I am on Mastodon as well as Twitter still, mostly interacting on Mastodon, but a little bit on Twitter. You can find all my links at wesfryer.com/after. And Peggy is sharing a Geek of the Week there as well. That Jackie Gernstein has a great article on ChatGPT at usergeneratededucation.wordpress.com. So this has been the EdTech Situation Room. We are a weekly podcast coming to you from North Carolina and Montana. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube, but we tend to update Twitter. I guess we do Facebook as well when we have a show postponement or anything changing with the show. You can access all of our show notes at edtechsr.com/links. And we'd also encourage you to check out our Substack, which we send out that not only includes the links, which we talked about, but we had 33 to talk about, and I bet we did about half of them today. So you can access those on our Google Doc, but you can also find those on our Substack. So we want to thank both Peggy as well as Betsy for joining us live, and encourage any of you who are able to join us live to do so. Until next time, stay savvy, stay safe, and keep playing with ChatGPT, and let us know what you discover, because I do think, and I think Jason would agree as well, this is going to continue to be a major, major changer of our learning and education landscape in the year to come. Have a great night.